What does it take to be a successful civil engineer, entrepreneur, and leader? Well, in this episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, I have with me Selena Rodgers Dickerson, and Selena has gone through it all. She overcame domestic violence. She had to work a 40-hour-a-week job while going to engineering school full-time. She had to deal with being laid off and then having to start her own business and investing in herself, and she accomplished so much through all of those things. And in this episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, she's going to outline how she did it, and she's going to give you a ton of inspiration to do it yourself. So we're going to jump in with Selena, but before we do, a quick word from our sponsor. Before we go on here, I'd like to recognize our sponsor for this episode, Tensar International.
Check out Tensar Plus, the award-winning design software for construction professionals to design with geosynthetics and calculate their value on projects. Tensar Plus is simple to use with a powerful engineering system at its core. It leverages our decades of research and experience with soils all over the world, so you can count on your solutions working the first time, even in the most difficult conditions. Whether you're designing a crane pad or need to build a temporary road over muck, the cost, time, and carbon savings can be calculated, making comparison with alternatives simple. Specs, reports, and product data can be generated for your design, and training resources, research, and our third-party expert reviews are all provided conveniently in the software if needed. Usable both online and offline, the app is available in browser and on all major mobile platforms. Whatever you're working on, Tensar Plus is your toolbox for success.
All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Selena Rodgers Dickerson is the president and CEO at SARCOR. Selena, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
No, we're happy to have you here. So let's get started by maybe you could just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do on a daily basis at SARCOR.
Absolutely. I'm going to try to give you the Cliff Note version of who I am and what we do. So I am from Birmingham originally, and I grew up in an area, Southwest Birmingham, which was not one of the most affluent areas in Birmingham. But my parents sacrificed to put my brothers and me through private school. And then I attended Ramsey High School, which is a magnet school located here in Birmingham as well. From there, I went to Tennessee State University, and I got my degree in civil engineering. And my trajectory was not necessarily the traditional go to school type thing. I had some pitfalls along the way. Like I'm a survivor of domestic violence. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And some things happened along that journey that took me off track for a moment, but I got back on. And so I went to school after that event. I went to school part-time, and I worked a full-time job so that I could get in-state tuition at Tennessee State. And so I can be considered an in-state student. It had this requirement of working a minimum of 40 hours a week, which is hard to do while you're in school for civil engineering or any engineering, right? So I was 27 when I graduated college. A lot of my friends had already graduated ahead of me, and I got a job right away. I had several offers, and I worked for Alabama Department of Transportation. Initially, I accepted that offer. I made a commute from Birmingham to Montgomery every day for a few years, and then transferred to the Birmingham office, which helped me today in my business because I was able to form some relationships that I was able to leverage. Fast forwarding to the Great Recession, 2010, I had left Aldott. I had gone to work for another firm. They transferred me to Atlanta. And on my 4-year anniversary day of working with that firm, they laid me off. And so at that point, I had to choose whether or not I wanted to take a chance on myself or if I wanted to get another job. And again, this was during the Great Recession. So jobs were not really prevalent within our industry. It was hard to find a job, but because someone had introduced me to Who Moved My Cheese about 6 months beforehand, and I was really engaged for about 2 years. I went through the MBA program, got my MBA in project management during that 2 years prior to being laid off. I was really involved in personal growth and development, read a lot of books on, taking control of my subconscious mind and learning how to be a leader. And I started volunteering for work that my supervisor had, in addition to what my job. I wanted to learn how to do things other than do the task that was assigned to me. I wanted to learn how to manage for an organization because I had this dream of having my own business, which is another story to tell. Something happened during that trajectory in college. My brother had a heart attack. And when my job told me, that full-time job I had, they told me that I need to choose between my job and my family. And I chose my family and I walked out. And that was the day I decided that I didn't know how I was going to do it. But when I was ready to have a family, I was going to make sure that I didn't have to ask for permission to be there for my family. And that shaped our company culture. And so once I was introduced to Who Moved My Cheese, I started making preparation, I would say up to a year in advance or so before that, on being laid off. I started seeing the signs around me that people were being laid off within my organization. And so I started making relationships back here in Birmingham. So I got laid off on my anniversary date. The next day, I came home.
Hey, Selena, before you go on there for a second, I just want to stop you because you talked about a lot of very inspirational stuff already in the first 5 minutes. And I'm sure you got our listeners already excited, but just to recap a little bit. First of all, for those who aren't familiar with what Who Moved My Cheese is, it's a book by Spencer Johnson, and it's really focused around the idea of that sometimes we're so uncomfortable with change, but the change can be so transformational for us once we are comfortable enough to make that change. It's a parable. It's a short book, but it's a very excellent read. I recommend it to everybody. But just going back for a minute, I would imagine that all of the adversity that you dealt with over the years that you explained to us, domestic violence, having to have a 40-hour-a-week job while you were in engineering school, which to me is crazy, which is amazing to be able for someone to be able to do that. The long commute that you had, right? These are all things that I would imagine that when you had to make the decision, I mean, obviously it seems like an easy decision for you, obviously, to go and be with your family. I mean, I think that's could be an easy decision, but I'm sure that in the back of your mind, because you had gone through all that other stuff successfully, you kind of felt like you could bet on yourself with your own company. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. It's something about, being near death that brings you to the realization that if you can get through a time where you didn't know if you were going to make it to the next second, that you can make it through a layoff, right? A layoff is minimal in comparison to having to play unconscious to make sure that you survive, and praying, to make sure that your soul is okay. It's a lot to have dealt with that. And so when I was laid off, yes, it was hard. I had $2,400 to my name when I got laid off.
Oof.
Yeah, and bad credit, but I chose to work at SARCOR. When they gave me the option, do I want to work at Selena or do I want to work at SARCOR? I chose SARCOR. My dad had this saying, Anthony, he said, when you're full, everyone's full. And I didn't get that at first until I had a daughter and a husband. And what that meant was I only had to take care of myself. That I was the only person responsible for me. And so if I needed to take a chance on something, I needed to do my dream. I needed to live my dream and take a chance on having my own company before I had the responsibilities of motherhood and being a wife.
That's awesome. I love that. And there's something, being an entrepreneur myself, there's something about the ability to bet on yourself, right? And to be able to kind of put it on your shoulders and say, like, listen, I know what I need to do. And I may or may not get help from other people, but I'm just going to have to, load up the weight on my shoulders and kind of get it done. And I think, your past experiences, like you described, are really can build confidence for someone and say, hey, if I can get through those things, I can certainly start my own business and grow my own business. So take us inside of that when you got the business started. Take us through those first couple months and how you got things rolling.
Well, like I mentioned, I knew that layoff was going to be coming at some point. I started looking around to see what was happening, and I was also working on my MBA. So I started taking classes sponsored by the SBA pretty early on between that time of being laid off. Small business classes, like how to have a business, how to write a proposal. They were free classes. So instead of me using my vacation time on me to just relax, I used my vacation time to travel back to Nashville, at the campus of TSU and back to Birmingham at the SBA office to take these small business classes. I learned about financial statements. I learned how to, quasi use QuickBooks a little bit, or at least understand what it meant, proposal writing again, how to write a capability statement, all those things. And so when I went to talk with the engineering firm that gave me my first shot as working on projects, and the person that was in charge of that office, that president of that office, I came in with not a resume, but I came in with like an SOQ on myself, a statement of qualifications. And so the opportunity presented itself that I was able to hand them that. And they asked me, what are your goals in 5 years? And I said, I want to have my own firm. And so I'm very appreciative of that organization for giving me a shot. And I worked out of a cubicle in their office with their team, just doing backlogs CAD work for a while. And then I started going into business development meetings with them. And then we started teaming on projects together. And after about 2.5 years, 3 years, I had enough past performance to go after my own contracts. And I was able to get my own contract with the city of Birmingham. And it was a huge deal to be able to leverage that. And what was so amazing about that first project was that it was pretty close to my old neighborhood. So my grandmothers, on their way to their doctor's appointment, they would go right through this area. And so it really meant a lot that they could say my baby did this, right? It meant a lot to see for my community, for the people who I grew up around, my cousins, to be able to see that kind of work. And I was a part of that process. And but I'm big on continued education. When I got laid off, I only had 6 years experience in engineering, and I had gone from so many different types of work. What was transportation design, pre-construction for ALDOT, and then I left, and the company that I was working for, they had me doing water and wastewater treatment plant design, and then I went into utility inspection work for sewer rehabilitation for various municipalities and water meter installation repair. And so I feel like it was my own little rotation program, I guess you can say. I got to see a lot of different areas in civil engineering. And so that helped me be well versed in what I could do as a army of one. But I put everything back into the company. I mentioned I had $2,400 to my name. I didn't have a loan. I didn't have parents to give me any money or anything. So I bootstrapped from that point to where I saved enough money to where I can hire my first full-time engineer.
Wow. It's very inspiring. I mean, basically from everything you've told me so far, that's the reason that I always tell people, including my own 3 kids, there's no excuse in life for you not to be able to accomplish something with the information that's available to us today, right? Books, videos online, anything you want to do is really there for you, but you just got to have the confidence and the energy and the desire to go ahead and do it. Like my son, for example, is really struggling in one of his classes. And I said to him, the teacher offers extra credit, extra help every day after school. If you're not going to that, then that's on you. Right? Then you can't come home and say, hey, I didn't do that good in the class. Well, did you go every day? Did you show the teacher you want to learn more? You want to try more? Right. And so it's like, to your point, everything that you did was, I took, my vacation time and I went and learned stuff, right? Like, you have to do stuff on your own if you really want to be successful in life. And there isn't any excuse not to do it today, because everything that you could possibly need is available somewhere.
That's right. And that goes into what I believe, and I tell my daughter's 8, she'll be 9 in about a month or so, but I talk to her a lot and my team members about vision and values. We can have a vision to do something. Like she says she wants to take over my company one day. And I tell her, well, Allison, I'm building something that could be a legacy business, but I'm also looking to build something that someone wants to buy, because that means it's functioning without me having to do day-to-day operations. That means that whether I choose to explore that avenue or not, I have built something that has an involved system, but you have to have a vision for it. You can say that you want to do something and you want to have see that trajectory, but if you're not planning 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line and programming your subconscious mind to actively move towards those steps, you're not putting forth what it takes to show value towards your vision.
Wow, that's awesome. Listen, she's got a great role model in you, of course, that she can, kind of follow the lead with. But no, you're right. I mean, listen, if you don't have that vision and you don't have the values to back it up, it makes it very hard to be able to get, do great things in life. And those are things that, and honestly, we talk about that all the time at EMI. I mean, our values are very simple: give, guide, grow, right? We give our all, we guide each other, we grow together. Every single person in our organization can recall them, and they live by them, and they know what they are, right? A lot of times people get lost when you have complicated values or mission statements and people don't remember what it is. And that's really not the point of it to me. To me, it has to be something that's right here in the forefront of your mind. And you're kind of living it on a daily basis, right? And if you can't do that, then it's not, it's something for us that we use to keep the team together, right? Like if you want to work at EMI, you got to be under the mindset of got to give, guide, grow, right? It's like a simple thing that you can kind of measure everything off of. So I think that that's really powerful. So let's talk a little bit about education. Let's talk about your educational background. You've got your degree in civil engineering. You've got an MBA in project management. Talk a little bit of how that has influenced kind of your leadership style and some of your decision-making processes at SARCOR.
Absolutely. So I mentioned that my trajectory through undergrad was not traditional. And so it was tough, working a full-time job and going to class. That meant I didn't get off work till 2:00 in the morning sometimes. And I didn't appreciate that. I thought it was just a struggle that, having to be back in class at 8:00, have enough time to maybe get a meal in, then show up for work at 5:00 in the evening, and work to 2 a.m. At some points, I even had 3 jobs at a time just so I can maintain that 40-hour-a-week requirement to show proof that I was doing the requirement for the university to have that in-state status. And so that taught me a lot as far as like what it took. If I think about like now, people say, how do you stay up at night and doing some of the work? I've done it for so long in college, right? It's like I was conditioning myself in some kind of way that for this trajectory, this ordained path that I'm on. And but what I realized when I left the Department of Transportation and went to the other firm, we were working on a joint venture project with multiple companies within the Birmingham area. And I started looking at the leaders within the organization. And I noticed that the leaders had MBAs. They were not just an engineer. They knew how to manage the project. They knew how to manage the people. They knew how to manage the money. And so I chose to go and get an online degree for my MBA. It was before online degrees were really popular, but I was able to take that information that I learned through the MBA program and the project management courses in particular, and transfer that to what I was doing every day on my job. So as I was learning what my supervisor did, I was able to see how that could be applicable to what I was doing in my course curriculum in the MBA program.
Wow, that's awesome. And again, it's like, I think successful people, they look at what other people have done that are out there in the industry, and you kind of collect ideas on, what has made people successful. And then you try to make sure that you do the same types of things, right? It's like, Absolutely. Yes, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and do it yourself, of course, but it's helpful that you don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel in terms of what needs to be done.
That's right. A mentor of mine told me long ago, he said, you may not always have a mentor to show you how to do what it is that you're endeavoring to accomplish, but you have books, you have the internet, you have so many other resources. Like you mentioned a little while ago, if I don't know how to show leadership, I can read a leadership book. If I want to know how people change, how visionaries change, I can read about Henry Ford or any number of leaders on how they grew from one point in a vision to the other. If I want to make sure I'm learning about collaboration with my team, I can read Good to Great or any other number of books. There's so many things that you can do. I listen to your show and listen to other leaders and see what they've done and what their journeys have gone through over the years, and say, okay, well, if this is how they handled that, maybe I should. It gives me something else to think about, because honestly, I don't have a lot of people that look like me in this area that do what I do. And so, yes, I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneurs and they give me great advice, but to get and to navigate here is, I might be the only woman or only Black person in a room sometimes. And that's just something I've learned to embrace.
That's great. No, and again, with all the stuff that you've gone through, right? Like you said, you've really built yourself up to the point that you're able to handle kind of any type of situation because of what you've gone through and how you've stuck with it, and you've had to deal with a lot of challenging situations. And that's not really something anyone's going to learn in school. It's just doing it, getting out there and doing it, right? And going after it. And that's great. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. As the president of SARCOR, what are some leadership principles that you prioritize to kind of foster that positive and productive work culture within the company?
Absolutely. So I already talked about the vision and values.
Yep.
That's one thing. Our mascot is Voltron. And I might be dating myself a little bit when I talk about that. But I grew up with Voltron. I have two brothers, so I had to watch what they watch. But Voltron was stronger as one unit. You had the different parts, but when they became one body, they were stronger. You think about whether you can make a whole lot more impact with a fist versus a slap. And so, but if we're focused on, I said one voice, one goal.
Yeah.
That's who we are. And so, and I believe totally in cross-pollination within my team. So I don't want any one person to know everything about a project, because things happen, life happens, right? And someone should be able to catch a cold and not have to struggle through, because our health and our well-being is priority. Our families come first, and we do have a family first culture within our organization. And that's just because what I experienced when my younger brother had that heart attack and I had to choose between my job and my family. I don't put my employees, my team members, in that same type of situation when their kids need to be parented.
Right.
Their moms need to be moms. They can't focus on the project or their work if they are worried about whether their kid is going to be okay. All right. Yeah. They shouldn't have to miss a field trip and take PTO when we can essentially work any time of the day.
Yeah.
I just ask for team members to be responsive to our clients, but that might not mean you should be able to go to your kid's field trip without exhausting all your PTO time. PTO is for vacation. And so, and I don't like micromanaging. I want to be involved, but where we are right now, we're going through the process of implementing traction. And we just started this month. And so as we're going through this process, it's helping me get a lot of things that I've been doing on my own for the last 13 years out of my head and spreading them out in various buckets of responsibilities through that accountability chart, as the book says. About 2 months ago, I hired the person who would be that implementer. Or integrator.
Yeah. So Selena, let me just mention to everybody here, if you're not familiar with Traction, it's a book by Gino Wickman, and he basically developed this system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, which we also, by the way, use at EMI. And it's just a very structured system for building a small business up with the right leadership and the right organizational kind of charter structure, if you will. Yes. It's very systematic, which is why I like it as an engineer, because it makes sure that you're doing things on a very regular basis and measuring the right things and hitting the right things, which is very beneficial. So I do think that that's great that you're utilizing that. And another thing I'll say is, as far as the Voltron reference goes, which I was a Voltron fan as well. If you're not familiar with that, it was like an animated series way back in the day. And it was basically a bunch of these space warriors, and they all had different strengths, but they would come together and form like this large robot. So it does really make a great analogy for a company, because, everyone has different strengths and you need to bring them together, most likely to achieve the goal of the company ultimately. But getting back to the one thing that you said that I really like, talking about your staff and your team members and making sure that they have the ability to be at home when they need to and to be at work when they need to. I mean, that's just, that's really the definition of culture, right? It's like, I watched a video, I think, recently online about culture and what it means in a company. And really, what the person said that I thought was really great was that culture is like the way someone feels about working in an organization, right? And you want people to feel comfortable and to feel like, for example, in this situation, listen, Selena trusts me. And if I need to go home and be with my kid who's sick, she knows she's fine with me doing that because she knows that I'm going to still get my work done one way or the other type of thing, right? You kind of have to build that relationship with your team, and you have to be very vocal about that. And, I found that in most situations, when you create a culture like that, people will respect that culture and they will do whatever they have to do to get things done. Which is kind of the opposite thinking, right? Where it's like, you're not someone who's standing over someone telling them, get this done, I'm watching you. It's more like, hey, I trust you. I know you'll do what's right. Be with your family when you need to, be at work when you need to. And I find that 9 times out of 10, people are going to do what they got to do.
Absolutely. It's been a great way to process. Even prior to COVID, that was our culture. And we were already set up for remote work. And so that was, I never wanted to be tied down to a server, and I am not a fan of VPN. And so I was like, how can I use technology to make the lives better for my team, so that we can be flexible in our lives? It was something I wanted for myself. And as a leader, I did not believe that do as I say, not as I do type philosophy. This is who we are, because for me, I am looking to grow leaders. Whether someone chooses to stay with SARCOR or not, I hope they do. I hope things work out. I'm trusting that they're being hired for that particular reason, but I want to add value to their lives. I'm hoping that something that they've learned from me, whether it's a book that I've read or something I discussed doing a team training or a seminar that I took them to, or a responsibility that I gave them to shine, that it takes them to whatever that journey is that God has ordained for them, and that they can say, Selena helped me get to this particular point in my life. I always have them think about, what do they see themselves in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? And I don't always ask them to share that with me, because it might be personal to them. Right. And they might not want to share, like, I want to leave your company, right? But in most cases, they will share. They say, for example, just earlier this week in our team meeting, one young lady said, I'm gunning for his job. I want to grow in this company. I love this company. And, and she's someone who just recently came back after a sabbatical, or a short period of time. She had to go home to Kenya, and came back, and her job was still safe. It was something that she needed to take care of. And she was welcomed back with open arms, because she's a member of our family, right? I want to treat people like family. If I can't trust a team member, then that's not who should be in our organization. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It is really like your family, and really you spend more time a lot of times with the people you work with on meetings and stuff like that than really you do at home, right? Sometimes. And yeah, I think, and I like your example a lot in terms of like asking people where they want to go. And quite frankly, if someone at EMI said to me, in 5 years from now, I want to go start my own company, I would probably say to them, good. Like, when you get to that point, I'll help you do it, right? I think that's the kind of relationship you want to have with people in your organization, because to me, if you're worried about people leaving your company, then you haven't built the company the right way. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. I kind of have to say, I learned that from Nick Saban, right? He's had so many coaches and offensive coordinators for so long, but he said something similar to what you just said. Like, yes, they're supposed to grow. I'm hiring the best, and they should want to go out and become head coaches. That's why I'm hiring them today. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, and then I would imagine that shows that his coaching is working well. If he's growing coaches that are going to go on and be great coaches, then he's got a good process and a good organization established there. Yes. So it's something that you have to think about. So let's talk a little bit about minority-owned businesses. And in what ways do you think that these businesses can make a significant impact in kind of the broader business community, beyond just the idea of meeting these minority participation goals? Yes, I'm so glad you said that. I have this thing that I say sometimes, like, we are more than a VBE goal. We are more than that. In civil engineering, what we do, whether it's land development, aviation, roadway design, working with developers, it doesn't matter. We have to have the same licenses, software, insurance as a majority firm. So we have the capabilities. Our staff may be smaller, We may not have all the access that some of the majority firms have, but we have already proven to meet the requirements by those things. And so I really appreciate the companies that I work with that look at us and just say, hey, we want to include you anyway. There's no goal surrounded a requirement for this project, but we want to use SARCOR anyway. We like working with you. You've shown that your company is credible, that your team is credible. And that goes back to the people that we hire within the organization. But because, there are some gaps within the minority participation arena, whether it be woman-owned, Black-owned, whatever, I started another company a few years ago just by having a conversation with a project manager. And through that company, it's called Selena, I provide resources and try to track metrics from not just on the construction phase, where we all kind of get lumped into a group for a requirement for construction on large developments, but on the design phase, even all into when you're thinking about the inclusion, who's catering the meetings? Are you choosing to pick a minority caterer for those events, or are you just going with the brand that you've always used because they're around the corner? Because there's so many ways that you can have inclusion on projects, instead of just because we've always been doing it one way doesn't mean it's right. And so that, and then I serve on the National Women's Business Council. I was appointed by the SBA administrator in June of last year. And we're working for our next HR 50/50. And just so you know, this month is the 35th anniversary on October 25th of HR 50/50, which gave women the right to get a business loan in their name. Prior to 1988, women had to have a male co-signer for
that's
a loan.
crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, yes, I was 11. This was in my lifetime, right? And so prior to then, it was, I'm all for asking for help, Anthony, but permission is a whole nother thing.
Yeah, it's like a different level. No, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because I do agree with you that it's a shame that a lot of times people see minority businesses as a checkbox to fulfill the requirements for the contractor, for the subcontractor, right? Mm-hmm. Because to me, what a minority business says to me, especially after everything we talked about today, is somebody took a chance on themselves. Somebody knew that they were going to be against the odds, right? Yes. But they went after it anyway. Right. And they grew their business. So I think while I understand that it can be helpful for a minority business that those guidelines exist, because that can get them started off and get them work from these larger companies, which I think is a good thing. Yes. I don't think that it's fair to say that that's why they exist or that's how they exist. To me, they exist because someone like Selena rolled up her sleeves, took her vacation days to go learn stuff, worked a 40-hour job while she was in engineering school. And that's really the power and the story behind a lot of the minority-owned businesses. So I'm glad that we're, putting some light on that, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. And, people tend to just sometimes think about those check mark things, but that's just a kind of a product of it.
Absolutely. And in some states, like in Alabama, our DBE program doesn't have a goal for professional services. So that means that I have to be able to perform. My team has to be able to perform, is because there's no requirement with our DOT to have engineering services a goal for that. And so that means that I have to be a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable and making sure that I'm not the only person representing the company, but I've built other leaders within the organization that can have the conversations and show the competency as we grow. Yeah, well, something tells me that you're someone who's comfortable being uncomfortable at this point. But so let me ask you this, because you mentioned that
you're oftentimes the only person that looks like you in a room. So what steps have you taken to address and kind of overcome any potential biases or barriers faced by women and minority professionals in the field of civil engineering?
One, I need to make sure that I'm put together and I'm head ready. My old supervisor used to say that I need to get the rah-rah out. And that means getting rid of the imposter syndrome, knowing that I deserve to be there regardless of my trajectory. I didn't have a dream and someone said, I will finance your dream for you. And knowing that I've worked my butt off to be in the same room means a lot, because I started with nothing relatively. And so, but I'm also dependable. When I sign up for a board, or like I serve on several boards. One here is our local Birmingham Business Alliance, which is somewhat operating like a economic development arm or chamber. And I see the people in front of me, and I was like, okay, God, you have me here for a reason. And so I approach when I go into the room, I've gotten the rah-rah out, and I understand right then that I'm here at this table for a reason. And we've all heard the term lean in, but if I'm there, I'm not there to be silent, right? I'm there to either to provide be an asset to that organization. They saw something in me from what I was already doing. And so I'm going to give them the person that they already have grown to love. And, if they thought enough of me to ask me to be a part of that organization, or even if I go to a conference. I was recently at a conference, the ATEC conference, and there were no other Black women there. No other Black women that owned. I was it. There was only maybe one other Black man, and he was a vendor for one of the products or services. And so I would be deceiving everyone if I didn't say the truth, that it's exhausting sometimes. All right, it's exhausting to go and have to be that person for my community, to be that person for other Black women and little Black girls like my own, knowing the weight and responsibility that I carry. But even though it can be exhausting, it's also a blessing and a privilege to be there. And I embrace that responsibility. And I say it's exhausting because I'm naturally an introvert. I'm an introvert forced to be an extrovert. And
I wouldn't have guessed that you're an introvert. But
yeah, I am. I'm the wallflower at the party. Yeah.
Wow.
And so to get to be at a conference or a workshop and having to force myself to go give a solid handshake, introduce myself, tell what our capabilities are in a very succinct amount of time, and be able to remember how to engage with that person the next time I see them, is something that I've learned to love to do.
Yeah, and I think that it's an important point to drive home that, unfortunately, as Selena has kind of said, if you are a minority, right? If a lot of people in the room maybe don't look like you, people are going to make judgments about you possibly before you say one word. So Selena's point of really making sure that you're sharp, that you're prepared, that you have your confidence, and that you're ready to go is more important probably than others, because you need to be prepared to wow. So people are going to say all those judgments that they're making, you're going to kind of get rid of them when you speak and when you show them your capabilities and your knowledge and your ability to achieve your goals and do what you want to do. And so I think it's a really good point for those of you out there that might be in that situation, knowing that preparation and building confidence is the key. And obviously building confidence does come with time and going through some of the things, like, for example, Selena had to go through in her career and her life that helped her build her confidence. But you can't prepare enough really in those types of situations to make sure that you're ready to go in those situations. And kind of building on that a little bit, what do you envision as the role of women in minority-owned businesses as it evolves in the business landscape, especially within your kind of Metro Birmingham ecosystem that you're familiar with?
Absolutely. So personally, my personal endeavor is to team with other women. We can collaborate. We don't have to be competitors. We can be collaborators. We're better together. And just showing people through my own example that ego is not a part of it. What's the best way to produce what we need to produce for our community? A lot of us are civil engineers because we love seeing the changes that we can create in our communities. We do the things that are invisible. Now, people just want clean water. They want their roads to be nice. They want sidewalks in their communities, right? So, but they don't see the work that we have to do to get to that point. But if that's a goal that we have, and here in Birmingham, a lot of us, we are philanthropic and we're giving back anyway. So let's make a bigger impact and do those things together instead of I have to have this little small slither of the pie by myself when we can collaborate to get more of the pie. And there was a story this morning from our Birmingham Business Journal stating how hard it is for women to get financed in business. And those disparities still exist, even though we can get a loan in our own name now, right?
Yeah.
VC money is much lower for women, as well as just getting a standard SBA loan is the disparities still exist. So what we're doing on the National Women's Business Council is trying to change those disparities and get through that glass ceiling, make one more crack in there with something pivotal that can change. I chair the Women in STEM committee. And a lot of times you hear STEM is all about coding and tech, and you see the AEC industry get left out. And then so we teach our kids, we go to school, our little girls, they go to school, they learn STEM, they learn the code, they say, well, you need to go into engineering. And then we send them to our universities, and the universities have different types of engineering, but those who choose civil, mechanical, electrical, architecture, all right, once they get out of college and they might get a good job with the organization, their trajectory to get out and start their own business is going to be that much harder than that young lady who chose to write her own app.
Right.
Because the funding is not there. The funding mechanism is not there for the AEC industry. And so we're working to change the conversation about STEM systemically as a organization to where it includes our industry, so that women of any race can take part of equitable financing, equitable opportunities, so that they can live their dream.
That's awesome. No, it's very exciting to see these types of things happening in the industry today. And it's people like you that are driving them, which is awesome. All right. Last thing for you. What advice do you have for individuals, particularly women and minorities, who aspire to start their own business or pursue leadership roles in engineering and project management?
The first thing I would say is get in the books, because it's going to take more than the theory that you've learned in school and the practical knowledge that you've learned on your day-to-day tasking in your job. That's anything from whether you're in engineering or if you want to start a bakery. There are going to be some obstacles that you're going to have to face. You're going to have to get real used to the no's in life and the rejection and the one or two people who you come across who don't look at you for who you really are, who challenge you and berate you, even though, and they wouldn't do the same thing to a non-minority. But because they might think you're an easy target, they would try to take advantage of you, or they may try to hurt your feelings to prove a point along the way of that work. And figure out early on, what is your why? Because that why is going to help you get over that rejection. That why is going to keep, when that rejection hits, when you get that denial, when you get that hard talk from a client, that particular why that's going to get you out of bed, it's going to make sure that you get up and fight to see the next day, that it was going to keep you on your trajectory for what you plan for yourself, that you see for yourself 10 years down the line. They're not going to stop you, right? That why is going to be that gasoline that you need, or if you think about today's technology, that charge on your EV vehicle. to get through to the next phase. And so, and use those things, use those hurts, that heartache as more energy to keep going. Yeah. And show that person or people, whomever those people, those roadblocks. If you've read The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkerson, and he refers to these people as the border bullies. Those are the people who claim to love you, right? They want to help you, but they also say, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Right. Or, those kind of people, they come disguised as friends, families, neighbors, right? Yeah. So you take these things, you take these situations, and you use them as your fuel to keep going. Yeah, all of that. And
that's awesome.
But you got to start here, and centered in your faith. For me, it's my faith. It's my day-to-day faith in God that helps me to get up and go. It's my daughter. So right. I look at her every day and I say, I can provide more for her and set her up to where she doesn't have to start from zero. If she chooses to have her own business, she won't start with $2,400, right? It'll be something I can help her do, because I've started building for her. A long time ago, even before I knew she existed. It's the goal that I have to create multiple millionaires within my organization. Now, I should not be the only someone in the company. I would love for my team members to say, I'm going to my lake house to work this week, right?
Yeah, no, it's you pushing everybody up, right? You want to raise everybody up. Yeah, and I think the other thing about like the example with your daughter is, regardless of even how much money she's going to have, she's got the example of you to watch, who's someone who just did it on their own, right? Yes. So like, she's going to know that if my mom can help me out financially, that's great. But you know what? If she can't, so what? She did it without money. I could do it without money too, right? And that's what I think is a gift to give someone. And to me, that's the gift of being an entrepreneur. I tell my kids that all the time, is you can figure out ways to create money. You're like a magician, right? Like, because you got the hard work and you got the vision, and that's important. And I love the idea about being able to, deal with rejection. I always tell my kids, I feel like I'm like Rocky Balboa, right? You could punch me in the face 100 times, but I'll just keep coming, right? Because I've been through this before. Like, you're not going to be able to slow me down, and you got to have that mentality. But I do think what you said earlier about getting in the books is really important, right? Because a lot of engineering professionals don't take the time to perfect the technical craft. They try to jump into management too quickly, and it becomes a little bit harder to lead people effectively, because you want to understand what they're doing and understand the background and be able to speak with clients about some of the technical stuff. So a lot of great stuff here, Selena. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to visit with us here on the Civil Engineering CEO. And I know that your message here is going to be very inspiring to our listeners. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate the opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Selena. To me, it was super inspiring to see someone who has overcome everything that she has, but has been as successful as she has, is inspiring. And I hope that you can leverage some of what she's done to push yourself. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to our channel here. We do put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I hope to see you next week.